Bowls as 7 of the 10 Big 12 teams play postseason football in 2015 and 16. The most fun, I think we've got an argument here. Baylor, North Carolina, TCU-Oregon. Most exciting game we shall see. That's a good one to call. But the most important, obvious. Are you kidding me? Boomer Sooner taking on number 1 Clemson. It's for the national semifinal as the Big 12 gets to compete for the national championship this year. This is the Big 12 breakdown. We come your way every Wednesday night at 9 o'clock Eastern Time, 8 o'clock Central Time. We bring on the best bloggers, with an S usually, but the best blogger this week in the conference when we talk Hunter Cook from Viva the Matadors. And Hunter, thanks for joining us. And I got to say, it's got to be nice to be back in postseason play for the Red Raiders, right?
Man, as soon as we won that 6th game, I just kind of like sat back and relaxed. It's like, well, nothing else that happened this season matters because we're going to a bowl. It's automatically better than last year. It was good. It was a good feeling.
Exactly. So before we dive in all these bowl games, and again, we got 7 Big 12 teams to talk about, and they're facing a pretty good lineup when you talk Clemson, North Carolina, LSU, Ole Miss, Arkansas, a lot of SEC matchups there, Oregon, Arizona State. There's really not a softie in there. So if you go through the other Power 5 conferences, most of them, somebody's playing a group of 5 team that's really not that good. Like I just talked to an ACC guy, Virginia Tech's taking on Tulsa, those kind of games. But no breaks here for the Big 12 here, Hunter, when you talk about some pretty heavy hitters in the other conferences.
Yeah, that's the way we like to live, I suppose. You give us the best, except for Baylor. They don't. Sorry, I had to throw that Baylor jab in there. They don't do much non-conference, but they are playing a very, very underrated North Carolina team. I really think that'll be a top matchup if Baylor can get a quarterback back.
Yeah, that'll be a fun one. So, before we start talking about these games, I want your take on Texas Tech because, we certainly talk a number of times during the offseason, and you set me up really well with what we can expect. And it's the passing offense. It's Patrick Mahomes at quarterback. It's DeAndre Washington and so forth. And we expected an improved defense. So maybe let's start there. Your thoughts about the Red Raiders, and did they improve as much as you would have liked on D?
Well, considering that we are second to last nationally in defense, the only team worse than us is Kansas. I would say that no, they didn't improve as much as we expected, but there still was improvement evident there. I mean, when David Gibbs came in, he didn't come in and say, we're going to hold people to 100 yards per game. He said, well, we're going to play aggressively. We're going to bend but don't break. They're going to get some yards. They're going to get some points, but we are going to get turnovers. And that is the stat where we have just jumped up. We went from, I think it was about -10, -11, -9 maybe in turnover margin in 2014 to where I think we're either +5 or +6 in 2015. And that's completely due to this new philosophy we have. I mean, you saw it in our recent game against Texas. We have Nigel Bethel, our corner, going up for a jump ball with a much taller receiver, and the receiver comes down with it. Bethel just reaches in there and takes the ball away. It wasn't a pick. It was a forced fumble and a fumble recovery. And that kind of mindset, that kind of tenacity, that kind of attack, if we allow that to blossom, if we give it time and let it build up and just let it build, I really think we will be improved on defense. Again, I think we'll improve next year. I just think we have to be patient with it right now. But yeah, passing offense has been everything we expected it to be and more, but defense improved, but I would love to see more.
And that's pretty much what we've seen from the top teams in the Big 12 during this kind of renaissance of the passing offense in the mid to late 2000s in the Big 12, where the better defenses, the teams that win the championships or contend for championships, don't have great defenses, but they get 2 or 3 big stops, big plays, a strip sack, a takeaway, and it goes from where each team gets those 11 or 12 drives. Well, you're scoring 7 or 8 times close to that with a few field goals mixed in, but you're preventing the other team those other 3 or 4 drives, and that makes all the difference in the world. That's it right there.
More or less, man. It's how we like to play football in the Big 12. Really, really aggressive. It burns us sometimes, but hey, when we win big.
Hunter, what was your thought when you saw this matchup with LSU? The first thing that came to mind for most people was Leonard Fournette against a bad defense. And that was pretty much the first thought for all of us.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the first thing that pops into mind. Then a couple other things cropped up. LSU's defense hasn't been the past years, or they were D-line U when they were really going after people. I mean, they're still very, very good. Do not get me wrong, but this is not the LSU of years past. Their secondary might be a little suspect. I feel like we're going to attack them a little bit in that factor. But I really feel like we can get a couple stops on Leonard Fournette. LSU is a very, very one-dimensional team, and we've shown that against one-dimensional teams, we can at least limit them. We don't stop people outright at all, but we can limit the number of points they score. And with our offense, I mean, number 2 scoring offense in the nation, we can definitely score more points than just about anyone. So I feel like we have a little bit more of a shot than we're being given credit for. But also, man, I bleed Tech colors, so I could just be seeing this through my own lens. I have no idea, but I feel like we have a shot.
Well, at least you're honest, Hunter, because some people are like, yeah, they've got a read on it. But until they get out there, especially with the motivation factor, which I don't think should be any type of issue with Texas Tech, maybe with LSU, you're talking about the number 2 team in the country in mid-November before they played Alabama a little bit earlier than that, number 2 in the land. So who knows where they're at, but maybe they pumped a little life back in the program since they got their coach back. They expected Les Miles to be shown the door, and they seem to be a little bit more rejuvenated after carrying him off the field, and maybe they'll have a little bit more focus to play for their coach.
Yeah, maybe. We'll see. I mean, I literally have no idea, but what I do know is after that beatdown at Alabama, where they really just kind of took them behind the woodshed, man, LSU just hasn't been the same. And I think it's due to like a little bit of their run blocking. They're banged up. I know they had a really good fullback in John David Moore, who is now out. I believe he's still out, could be back for the bowl game, but he was a huge part of that run blocking success that they've had. And now that he's not in the lineup, it just seems like they've kind of deteriorated each game. So who knows? It's a bowl game. It's all down to motivation. Who wants to show up to play? Who's going to get the whole like disrespect factor in? Who can fire themselves up enough? And if it's Texas Tech, I think we'll win. If it's LSU, they'll probably win.
Well, you're totally on the mark in regards to the passing game at LSU. It's been tough to watch since Zach Mettenberger, Jarvis Landry, and Odell Beckham Jr. left a few years ago. But they do have 2 deluxe wide receivers in Malachi Dupree and Trayvon Doral. They just can't get them the ball in any reasonable way. So, but those guys are serious talents.
They definitely are.
Hunter, let's take it to New Year's Eve. So I find it kind of humorous that the Big 12 gets left out in 2014. That's the whole talk in the offseason is, okay, is this conference being disrespected? What are they going to have to do? They're going to have to be decidedly better than the other conferences, maybe have an undefeated team. And then Oklahoma is the one team that's the first team in the door and sitting there for a week waiting to see who they're going to play. So it's Oklahoma and Clemson.
Man, I have experienced firsthand from watching Oklahoma this year the absolute buzzsaw they have been transformed into after they lost to Texas. And I don't know what Bob Stoops put in the water. I don't know what he said to that team, but they're out here chopping people's heads off right now. That is a very, very good Oklahoma team, and we cannot take that early loss to Texas in a rivalry game where there's a lot of emotion, a lot of things going every single way as indicative of how Oklahoma's playing now, because they honestly look like 2 separate teams. And Clemson, while I do feel like they're very, very good and they deserve to be in the playoff, I'm not sure they're deserving of the number 1 ranking, if that makes any sense. They've had a couple of close scares with a little bit below average teams. And after this loss to Texas, Oklahoma has just dismantled every single team they played. They beat us by like 40 points. They beat Baylor by only 10, but it didn't really feel like a Big 12 10 points. It was like an NFL 10 points. Where we were like, oh my gosh, like how are they gonna score? And anytime where you're sitting here asking yourself, is Baylor going to score points? you know you're doing something right on that side of the ball. I just think I think it's very, very telling that Oklahoma, despite being the 4th seed, is being picked by many to win it. I feel like they're the Vegas favorite in this game, and I don't know. I think that's indicative of how they've played the second half of the season. They are an incredibly scary football team.
Hunter, I don't know if there's a team out there that has a better combination of quarterback, running back, wide receiver than Baker Mayfield, who, if you look at his numbers and consider that Oklahoma was not supposed to be in serious contention for the Big 12, 35 TDs to 5 picks, runs all over the place, makes plays like crazy. Samaje Perine's a beast. Joe Mixon, even, we can mention him and throw him in. And then Sterling Shepard putting up crazy numbers at wide receiver. And he's just a kid that's just polished, great route runner, definite hands, has the entire thing. I don't know if there's a threesome out there that can compete with Oklahoma when it comes to those 3 dynamic playmakers on offense. So Oklahoma, there's a reason that Vegas really likes this team. All the power indexes love this team and say they have played rock solid football for the last 7-8 weeks.
My Red Raider homer in me is saying Patrick Mahomes, DeAndre Washington, Jakeem Grant. But I will say that that Baylor trio is very, very good. Baker Mayfield has obviously improved from his time at Texas Tech. And the biggest way in which he has improved is not turning the ball over. Man, he has been rock solid carrying the ball, has not fumbled, only thrown 5 picks. He's just been on another level for them, not necessarily stats-wise, but he has been – I don't want to say more careful because he's definitely out there slinging it around, but the risks he is taking are far more calculated. He just seems like he's finally coming into his own with the mental aspect of the game, something he was beginning to come into at Texas Tech, but never really came into true fruition with. But they are a very good team, and from watching them, I can see why the power indexes favor them.
Yeah, across the country, I would say Clemson, Ohio State, Oregon are the 3 teams that come to mind when I look at quarterback, running back, wide receiver, that they're just elite positions there. All right, let's go down the bowl tiers here. We got Baylor. We talked about the Bears a little bit. I know they're disappointed in finishing in 9-3. They had an interesting date with Texas that last game because they basically couldn't throw the ball. We're basically playing a veer option of sorts against a North Carolina team, as you mentioned before we came on, disrespected, but they really showed up in the ACC championship game and may have been ripped off by the refs in an opportunity to not score after the onside kick and the phantom offsides play. But this could be a really fun one in the Russell Athletic Bowl with Baylor and UNC.
First off, I feel like that, and I'm totally disrespecting the ACC right now, whatever. I feel like that UNC game against Clemson was less of how good UNC is playing and more of how closer to pedestrian I think Clemson is. Not saying they're both not very good teams, but are they like number 10 and number 1? I don't know. We'll find out. But personally, as of right now, from looking at them in my more than likely completely biased eye test, I really don't think so. I feel like Baylor, who with a healthy quarterback, can I don't want to say run roughshod, but I think they'll win a mostly uncomfortable game by a comfortable margin if they have a quarterback. If they don't have a quarterback, all bets are off. We have no idea what can happen, but Baylor has a lot more talent than just on the offensive side of the ball. They have Sean Oakman, who it can be debated how much of an impact he's actually having. He's still a imposing figure, big talent. They have Andrew Billings, who's probably one of the best defensive tackles in the nation. A couple pretty good linebackers. Their normally leaky secondary has really come to play recently. Baylor, when healthy, is probably one of the more complete teams in college football. So it's all a matter of if they can get healthy enough to play a UNC team that is playing very, very well, but I also feel like is playing at their maximum potential. I feel like Baylor has room to grow and UNC does not, and that's why I'm taking Baylor.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to believe if North Carolina is that much better. They were disastrous on defense last year, like historically horrible on defense, like giving up 73 points to East Carolina, horrible on defense last year. Gene Chizik comes in, he does a great job, but with many of the same players, I think it's just a matter of technique and not blowing coverages, but they're really not that good on defense still. They've just gone from embarrassing to, okay, we can hold teams to 30 or 35 points.
Yeah.
Marquise Williams, a dynamic dual threat quarterback, but Baylor more explosive. For as good as North Carolina is on offense, I don't think they're at the Baylor level of offense for sure. We look at the Texas Bowl. Again, we covered LSU and Texas Tech, a traditional power in LSU, kind of having a down year, but maybe they've got some incentive with Les Miles on the sideline and considering everything that he went through against your Red Raiders. Then we've got the Sugar Bowl on Jan 1 with Oklahoma State. And once they played that really good game to get into the running for the Big 12 championship against TCU, they kind of faltered against the better teams, and they're taking on Ole Miss. And the last time Big 12 fans saw the Rebels, of course, TCU just completely annihilated them in the Peach Bowl last year. So your thoughts about the Cowboys and how their season shaped up?
Oklahoma State is a team that I just view as playing a lot better at home than they do on the road. Every single one of their really, really big wins came at Stillwater, and they really struggled when they weren't there. They gave up 53 points to us. We were up, 31-14 on them in the first quarter, and then had one of our Texas Tech meltdowns and lost 70-53. But I really don't know. Oklahoma State, like a lot of the Big 12, is really, really mercurial. We don't really know what we're going to get, and it starts with our quarterbacks. Mason Rudolph can be very, very good. He can also be very, very bad. J.W. Walsh can straight run you over. He can also fumble the ball in a clutch situation. We don't really know what we're getting out of Oklahoma State, but I also feel like the same is true of Ole Miss. I really don't get them. They started out as an absolute juggernaut this season, like dropping 70 points left and right. But then Chad Kelly kind of regressed to the mean, and they started kind of playing the same old way. They beat Alabama, but then I believe it was Florida who they got stomped by in the swamp. And ever since then, they just haven't looked the same. And I haven't really been keeping up with Ole Miss. I don't know if they're beat up offensively, if they have a bunch of injuries or stuff or something. But it just seems like the psychological, like mental aspect of like preparation for each game isn't there. So honestly, this is a complete and total toss-up for me. I have no idea. I would probably say Robert's going to kill me for this, but I'm probably going to say that Ole Miss takes this one.
Well, you get a pretty good read on the Rebels. Like you say, they came out of the gate and they weren't playing anyone, but they were dropping 70 all over the place. Then they hit Tuscaloosa. They take out Alabama. So it's like, wow. And the same thing happened last year. They rose to almost #1 in the country coming out of the gate strong. And yeah, they went to Gainesville against a Florida offense. They couldn't score against anyone. They get completely trashed. They lost to Memphis, which at the time after Memphis racked up some other wins, we thought, man, Memphis must be really serious. But then Memphis started losing to other teams, and they lost 3 games. So that wasn't an impressive loss. Certainly, a team that could have went to the SEC championship game very easily, losing to Memphis by a couple touchdowns. And what's funny is what really ruined and wrecked their season was, I don't know if you remember the play that Arkansas had in overtime against Ole Miss. So it's the 4th and 25.
Yeah.
Hunter Henry catches a pass. The tight end for Arkansas wings it over his head. Alex Collins picks it up. They convert a 4th and 25. Arkansas does against Ole Miss. Otherwise, Ole Miss is playing in the SEC championship game instead of Alabama. So they have this defense that everyone says is a great defense, and they give up 54 points to Arkansas. They rally, they beat Mississippi State, and look great in the Egg Bowl to finish the season. So yeah, up and down for Ole Miss. Right, Hunter, this is going to be fun. Oregon, TCU in the Alamo Bowl. So again, 2 great programs, kind of had down seasons, but still in that top 15 range. And they could really light it up. And the defenses, especially in the TCU side, once they got healthy, respectable enough. Now, if you're like me, Hunter, I know you're a Big 12 guy through and through, but I hate when the defenses aren't capable. It's great to see great offense when they're executing against capable defenses. But when guys are just running wild and free in the secondary, that's not fun to watch. But when the quarterback has to evade a rush, when he's going to stand tall in the pocket and face a rush and get hit in the mouth and has to deliver in a tight window. Those are fun offensive games to watch when the defense has put up resistance. And I think we'll get this with Oregon and TCU, but it should still be pretty high scoring.
Oh, I expect it to be high scoring as well. And this, once again, I mean, the Big 12, we eat our own. And a lot of it comes to how injured is everyone. I know Oregon, after kind of struggling out of the gate, has been absolutely burning down the rest of the Pac-12 as of late. And they've been playing incredibly well. With a healthy Vernon Adams, that is a very, very scary Oregon team. And they're going to make some waves. They're going to score some points. Their defense they're all right. They're pretty good. I believe they have one really good defensive lineman. But other than that, I can't really pick out any one person on Oregon's defense that really stands out to me. TCU, however, they've lost like 10 starters just to injury alone, and not for – I think they had a linebacker leave for personal reasons, but they had at least 10 starters out to injury. You got a banged-up Josh Doxson, who is easily an All-American wide receiver. I believe he was named an All-American today, if I'm not mistaken. They have Trayvon Boykin, who explosive dual threat guy. It's going to be fun, and they're going to score some points. But if TCU is healthy, I think TCU takes this one by 7. It's going to be a really, really good game and a really good back and forth. But when TCU's defense is healthy, when they're back up and back playing well, they could be one of the premier defenses in the nation. That is a very, very good program over there with Gary Patterson and what he does. And what he's had to work with has been ridiculous. I mean, they nearly beat Oklahoma at home, and they really played well against that Oklahoma offense that was kind of a buzzsaw. And TCU, they could do it. I mean, but once again, it's bowl season. This has been one of the worst years in recent memory with injuries. I mean, how many star players actually made it through this season uninjured or questionable? I think Baker Mayfield, Derrick Henry, and Deshaun Watson are the only ones who made it through, who were hyped up at the beginning of the season and made it through without being seriously injured. That's kind of ridiculous. So a lot of these big-time matchups, they're just going to come down to who can get their guys on the field and what percentage are they going to be playing at. If that TCU defense is at 80% of their operational firepower at the beginning of the year, I'll take TCU. If it's anything below that, I'll take Oregon.
And as you know, sometimes what we see, Hunter, is we see a team that we thought was going to be great get ravaged with injuries, have a little bit of a disappointing season, but then they get healthy for those 4 or 5 weeks. Then they come out in this bowl game and they look like the team that we expected to see the whole season. And that sometimes happens. And just to finish it off, Jan 2, we get the Liberty with Arkansas, a team that you got familiar with the last 2 years that ran you out of the building, but then you came back and paid back Brett Bielema this year, which I got to say I was surprised with. A very physical Arkansas team that you manhandled in the second half, taking on Kansas State. And one thing I got to say, Hunter, I'm amused with since I've done these, I think it's 16 breakdown shows with you guys in the Big 12, is the utter respect that you guys have for the Purple Wizard.
Oh, gosh, yes. Bill Snyder can turn a rock into gold. I don't know how he does it. Like, by all metrics, Kansas State should not be going to a playoff game. But they went into West Virginia and beat a pretty good West Virginia team. They're playing some good ball right now. They're going to be solid on defense, fundamentally at least. They have a really good kick returner and corner in Morgan Burns. Joe Huebner's healthy. It should be a good game. But I believe – I can't remember which podcast it was I was listening to, but Spencer Hall, one of the big SB Nation guys, was talking about Arkansas. And he's like, well, Arkansas, does it really get better or worse? They are the flat, consistent line as every team like fluctuates around them. There's nothing but consistency from Brett Bielema's squads. And I really feel like, and I'm disrespecting Bill Snyder so much by saying this, I feel like right now Arkansas is more consistent. And right now what you need, especially with Kansas State and the star power that they lost last year and the star power they don't have this year, is consistency. So I would actually take Arkansas on that one. I don't want to say they're playing amazing, but they're definitely not playing bad.
Yeah, I got to kind of agree with you. They played a really good game against Alabama. They lost by a score. They beat Ole Miss, the game we talked about. And I think it might be a little bit similar to what we saw when Arkansas took on Texas last year in the Texas Bowl. That game was like a pick'em game, and Arkansas really made them look bad. They're pretty serious when they've got their game together, and they've got Brandon Allen, a pretty consistent senior quarterback. And then finally, the Cactus Bowl. Don't know if a whole lot of people are getting excited about this, but man, all these games I'll watch anybody. As long as I don't have other obligations, I'll watch anybody playing. We got West Virginia, Arizona State. These were two like dark horse picks for a lot of people to be serious contenders in their conferences, and it just didn't work out for either squad.
I'll take West Virginia in this one. This is kind of an easy pick for me. West Virginia has a very, very good running game with Wendell Smallwood. I haven't watched much Arizona State, but I do know that they're 6-6. I don't know if they've been blown out, but I do know they struggle with consistency. And right now, this is a West Virginia team that can, as weird as it is to say about a Dana Holgorsen team or a Big 12 team in general, they can really wear you down going into the fourth quarter. They're pretty good, and I think they're going to take it to them.
All right, this is a Big 12 Breakdown. We come your way every Wednesday night at 9 o'clock Eastern Time, 8 o'clock Central Time. This is Mark Rogers, Mark Rogers TV. We've got Hunter Cook on the line from Viva the Matadors on SB Nation and the Texas Tech Red Raiders. So, Hunter, you carry the show all by your lonesome, so we appreciate that, man.
Put the team on my back.
We'll see you next time, man.
All right, see you, Mark.